Here's a Supertone 4-speed child's record player, probably from the early 60s. This one's a little bit nicer than some I've seen. This one actually has a metal tone arm and a tone control. Let's get a bass line on it and see what happens. Well, I hear filter capacitor hum. I hear no action from the cartridge. Alright, let's check our amp input. Getting a little buzz there, so that tells me the amp is working somewhat, which probably means our cartridge is dead. Now this is one of those one-tube amplifiers, which means that we have a 3-volt crystal cartridge driving the amplifier output tube directly. Probably what's going to happen with this amp is we're going to add an extra preamp stage and a more modern cartridge, and I think this amp will be fairly easy to do that with. We already have a hole here that looks like it will accommodate an octal tube socket. If I go that far with this, I'll probably use a 25L6 octal tube for the output tube, and then we'll use this 7-pin miniature tube socket for a 6AV6, which will be our preamp tube. But we won't jump to that right now. We'll just get the record player working as is and see where we need to go from there. Alright, what I'd like to do now is check the basics, and we'll start off with power supply voltages. And something like this, there's not many voltages that need to be checked. We need to check our output of the selenium rectifier. Should be at least 120, 130 volts. And then we have our plate voltage on the output tube, and our screen grid voltage, and our cathode voltage. That's about it. We'll start off here though. Our B+ voltage at the selenium rectifier is only about 47 volts, which is very low. That could either be caused by a weak selenium rectifier, or it could be caused by these defective filter capacitors. And oddly enough, in this set, we only have a single section filter capacitor. In most record players like this, we have one filter capacitor coming off of the selenium rectifier, and we have our resistor here, and then another filter capacitor here. And in many cases, we'll have a cathode bypass capacitor for the output tube, so they really cheapened out on the construction of this thing. Of course, when I'm through with it, it'll be a better record player than it was whenever it was new. But first, we'll start off by checking this capacitor just to see what kind of shape it's in, then go from there. And this filter capacitor is extremely bad. We're only reading 1.3 microfarads, so yeah, that could explain the hum and possible low voltage off of the rectifier. Here's our new filter capacitor installed, and checking the voltage off the rectifier, we have 128 volts. I can live with that. That's a lot better than the 46 or 47 that we were getting. Okay, I also had to replace the cathode bypass resistor. It's supposed to be 150 ohm. The original one was reading about 195, so just went ahead and replaced it. Alright, the amp seems to be working okay, but this cartridge is dead and will have to be replaced. And let's see what our options are for that. Okay, the cartridge on the left is the original one that came out of this unit. The cartridge on the right is what I'm going to install. The one on the right is a current production fan steel P51-2, and the -2 suffix means that it contains an all-speed needle. In other words, a 2mm stylus tip, which is a compromise that will play mono LPs and 45s as well as 78s. Not the best option in the world. Oh, who's this calling? My bookie? Well, I guess they didn't want me very bad. But anyway, a mono LP stylus will be 1 mil. A 78 RPM stylus will be 3 mil. So the 2 mil is a compromise between the two. And like I was saying, not the best option in the world, but for a little kiddie player like this, it should be okay, because I don't imagine they're going to be playing anything valuable on this unit. The biggest difference between these two cartridges physically are the mounting terminals. Our new one has round pins. Our old one has flat pins, so we'll have to change the cartridge connectors with the ones supplied. And like some of these other Chinese-made P51s that I've gotten, the terminals are not very straight, and they're actually a little bit loose in the cartridge body. So I'm going to glue those in place before I install this. That's one of the pitfalls of these modern cartridges, but you know, a lot of times they're not made the best in the world, but you know, what can you do when that's all you have to work with, and you have to make the best of it. Okay, we have a little Elmer's glue in place. We'll let that dry. Want to make sure those pins are nice and secure, and once it dries, we'll install the cartridge into the tone arm. Now we have the cartridge installed, and we're getting some action from the speaker, although it's a lot weaker than what it would have been originally, because this cartridge doesn't have the output that the original one had. We're dealing with somewhere in the neighborhood of a 0.5 volt to a volt output versus 3 volts for the original. Well, that's it, wide open, and with the tone control rotated to the extreme bass position, we sure enough get a cut in volume. So I think we're going to have to do a little modification to this amp in order to achieve reasonable results. And we're not totally destroying a polystyrene 45 on the first play, so that's a good thing. Won't let much of that play, because I hear they get real nasty with print stuff on YouTube, so we don't want that. Here's a 78 being played with the 2 mil stylus. It doesn't sound too bad.
There goes the Johnson Ray. Hi, hi. There goes the latest Shay. Ho, ho. It really isn't the gag.
Okay, let's do some more to this amp. One thing we can do to give this amp a little more gain is to bypass the cathode resistor with an electrolytic capacitor, negative side to ground. 22 microfarad, 50 volts should do the trick. Okay, let's do a comparison without the capacitor and with the capacitor. Okay, bear with me while I set the camera down a second. Here it is without the capacitor, and now here it is with the capacitor. I don't know how well that's gonna work with all the YouTube audio processing, but it definitely increases the gain a little bit. Here we are with a 78.
I'll miss that old thrill, and no one can fill.
And I think I probably will do the amp conversion, but I will save that for another video. I won't lengthen this one with that, because that particular conversion video will be pretty lengthy in itself. So we'll just leave it at that for this video. Okay, there you go. Thanks for watching, and more to come later.